Thank you everyone for being here tonight. We had this crazy dream a few months back about trying to create a space where people could come together, a like-minded tribe, and explore ideas. And while we're kicking it off tonight with us, we're absolutely open to other people who have wisdom or insights to share about how we use positive psychology in workplaces to be up here in our shoes in the future and do this as well. So we're thrilled that you're here with us tonight. I have to ask though, if perhaps you've ever had one of those weeks where not only did nothing quite go to plan, but even the things you thought were going well all suddenly start going wrong and the wheels start coming off everything, because you're catching me in the middle of one of those weeks, I have to confess. Pretty much everything that could go wrong this week has gone wrong when it came to work. In fact, so much so that tonight I packed a second outfit because wearing a white skirt when you're about to stand up in front, I'm like, that glass of red wine has to be coming at me given how this week is going. But so far, touch wood, it's all staying good. So if you see me in a different outfit later, you'll know why. I have to say, when I decided to leave my corporate career, I'd spent more than a decade in big companies like PwC, travelling around the world in roles like global brand director and marketing and having the time of my life. But when I finally decided to go, when I decided to cut those corporate ties, that safety net I had to pursue my dream of teaching positive psychology and wellbeing practices in workplaces to try and help bring out the best in people in what can be pretty challenging environments at times, I thought making that leap, cutting those ties, was going to be the hardest decision that I had to make, be the hardest thing to do. And once that was done, everything else would fall into place because, hey, I was living my dream. I also had a fair bit of grit, what Professor Angela Duckworth describes as passion and perseverance for long-term goals. I was known for being pretty persistent and getting things done in the face of challenges. And Angela's work, I'd been fortunate enough to study during my master's program with Angela. She was my statistics teacher. So I knew the work on grit in depth, and I knew that the number one predictor she'd found of success in most areas of our lives depend on us having grit, this passion and perseverance for long-term goals. And so with a heart full of hope, a lot of determination, I leapt out of that corporate environment and started my own business back in 2012, where I go in and out of workplaces all the time, sharing ideas like grit and how we can use more of them in our work. And initially, things went reasonably well, at least for the first 2 weeks. You see, I made the mistake that I think many of us make, where we assume that having talent in an area will be enough to see us through to get results. We have a naturalness bias where we like to believe that people truly are overnight successes. And yet when you scratch below the surface of most of those stories, of course what you find out is the years and years of hard work, the disappointments, the setbacks, the failures that went along the way. And in fact, talent is simply the promise of what is possible and not the guarantee, as I very quickly found out. Now, things didn't go too bad in the start. I managed to get through those first 2 weeks and begin really using what I'd started to discover as my interests in how you help bring out the best in people into a real purpose and a passion for the work that I wanted to do in the world. If any of you have seen the beautiful movie Julie and Julia, the movie about Julia Child's life, there's a beautiful moment in there where she's in a French restaurant as this fine American lady taking her first mouthful of beautifully cooked fish in a French buttery cream sauce and realising like a bolt of lightning that her mission in the world is to help teach American women how to cook good food, and of course went on to achieve great fame and success as she did it. Now, while that sounds very romantic and we're often encouraged to simply follow your dreams, be struck by that bolt of lightning, that moment of aha where suddenly your life purpose comes together, what the researchers found is that it very rarely happens that way. In fact, when it comes to cultivating grit, Angela suggests that the first step is really discovering what our interests are. And when you read Julia Child's longer autobiography, she in fact goes through this in quite a bit of detail, that yes, that moment of eating the fish in that restaurant was a bit of a lightning bolt for her, but it didn't suddenly shoot her to success. It was all the little moments that fanned that initial flame of interest that came in the weeks and months to come as she began shopping in the French markets and meeting local grocers courses. She took a French cookery course, and in there she met 2 French women trying to write a cookbook and started working on that project with them. And when it fell apart dismally, she decided that perhaps she should write a French cookbook for American housewives. And again, publisher after publisher said no before she finally had her opportunity to take her interest and turn it into her purpose and her passion. And my story was not dissimilar. I've not always been interested in positive psychology. So I started my life in branding and marketing and public relations and really didn't think very much about bringing out the best in people at all. It wasn't until I got to a point in my personal life and my professional career, not unlike this week, where things really weren't going that well and every effort I made to try to improve it seemed to go a bit askew, that I had a moment of going, there has to be a better way. And I was sitting on my couch, we were living in New York at the time one night, watching the Jon Stewart show, and this professor from Harvard was on, and he was talking about why his course at Harvard had become the most popular on campus. First time ever that something was more popular than accounting, and the course he was teaching was positive psychology. And I swear I sat up straight that night on the couch from my slump and went, there's a science to human flourishing, there's a science to happiness. Why had nobody told me before now? And so the next morning I went up, I bought Tal's book, Happier, that led me to Professor Martin Seligman's work on authentic happiness. One of my girlfriends was visiting from Australia. I was talking her ear off about this whole idea of positive psychology, I think mostly to shut me up. She said, why don't you go and do a master's in that? Suddenly I was off to UPenn to do my master's with Professor Martin Seligman and knocking on the door of my boss's office at PwC saying, I'm really done with this marketing stuff, can I move to HR and start teaching these ideas to people in an accounting and auditing firm? Tell me you don't need some grit to pull that off. So this fan of interest suddenly got nurtured into a real sense of purpose, that not only might this help me, but I might be able to use this interest to help a whole lot of other people. And so the purpose became a passion. And if you're going to go out there and live your dreams and make the kind of difference that you want, boy, do you need to have that passion in place for when you have weeks like the one that I'm currently in. It's not, though, the only ingredient for grit. Angela's also found that it's really important that we practice the things that matter to us most about. And so she's found that there are 2 kinds of practice you might want to engage in here. There was a really interesting study done of Olympic level swimmers and sort of studying, are they just extraordinary performers? It's easy to look at Michael Phelps and go, this is an extraordinarily talented freak of nature to be able to achieve what he achieves. But as they looked at Olympic swimmers, they found in fact that what made them extraordinary was actually very ordinary. It was their willingness to invest in deliberate practice, to set little stretch goals for themselves, to then really go after that with a lot of effort, real focus and really trying in those moments to get immediate feedback after they've done, and often not very positive strength-based feedback, but really pointing out this is not where it's working and this is where it's going wrong, and then to get back in and to keep trying. So deliberate practice where it's very effortful, we're very present, we're looking for the mistakes in order that we can get better, and their ability to string a whole lot of these ordinary moments together was the secret to what they found set Olympic swimmers apart to non-professional swimmers as well, or more amateur ones perhaps like myself. But that's not the only kind of practice Angela thinks is important for grit. The other form of practice are those moments of flow where actually it feels effortless rather than effortful, where we feel like we're in the zone, we're one with the music, the strengths we have are a beautiful match for the task that we're undertaking, and in the moment we might not be aware of anything particularly that's unfolding, but afterwards we're left with that real sense of pride and satisfaction for what we've done and what we've been able to achieve. So when it comes to the kind of practice we do, we want to be able to do both effortful practice and effortless practice as well. When I first started my business, I'd done a bit of speaking in my roles at PricewaterhouseCoopers, but I really hadn't stood in front of many groups like this and tried to teach the content from positive psychology and give people practical ways to do it. So I assure you, in the first 6 months in particular, there was a lot of effortful practice. And probably not just effortful and painful for me, but for the poor people on the other side of it as well, God bless them. But increasingly, there are also moments of flow. We were laughing yesterday as we were preparing for tonight, and the three of us had very different preparation styles. You know, one of us had done a lot of detailed slides and really thought through the content moment by moment. The other two of us were sort of, we've got some slides, we're going to get in there and fly by the seat of our pants, only for me to arrive tonight and find that the other person who was flying by the seat of her pants then spent all day preparing her script for tonight. So we're here in flow, in the moment, in the zone, and seeing what unfolds. And for me, I've learned as I've developed more technical ability that often this is the best way for me to present some of the content, where I can just be present with what's happening in the room and trust that the rest will occur around me. If you're going to take that kind of chance though, you definitely have moments where it doesn't go to plan. And sometimes when I walk into the room, it all comes together, it flows, I can see the lights going on in people's eyes as you share these ideas in workplaces. You can see the difference that you might have made on the other side of it. And other days it doesn't quite come together as well. The group might be in a different place, the dynamics in the room, there are other things going on in the organisation before you get there. One of my favourites was a moment with one of my clients where we'd been talking about strengths and how to do more of what we do best at work. The group was just warming up, we were getting a nice safe space going, and one of the participants raised a hand and said, "Is this just a management trick to get us to work harder?" And that kind of scuttled, you know, all that safety and good energy in the room and led us to a very different discussion, which was what the group needed to have, but wasn't necessarily what I quite imagined going into that day. We need to be able to fall down 7 times and stand up 8, as the Japanese proverb says, if we're going to be gritty about the things that matter most to us. And more than anything else in this area, what Angela's research is finding is our ability to have a growth mindset, the work of Professor Carol Dweck, where instead of fixating too much on the outcomes, that I have to walk in here tonight, blow you away as an amazing presenter and have you talking about it all the next day, I can walk in here tonight and be open to whatever's going to unfold, good, bad, or anything in between, and trust that it's the right moment for me and for each of you in that process as well. Sometimes when I bombed in front of a whole room and just not been at the top of my game, those learning moments were just as important for every other person in that group as they were for me. They take us to a different place, they open up a different conversation perhaps about how we be gritty, or how we use our strengths when things aren't going to plan, or how we embrace a learning mindset rather than holding too tightly to the outcomes that are often beyond our control. Doesn't mean I don't much prefer it when I landed in a room and can walk away and go, yep, I think I really helped someone today. But it also means the days I don't, that I don't walk away beating myself up for all the mistakes that I made as well. I take those as a gift, I imagine them with a big red bow on top of them, and I take the learning from those moments so that in the next room I walk into, I can do even better than I did that day. So we need to have this hope, this ability to pick ourselves back up when we fall down, and the growth mindsets that allow us to absolutely value outcomes, but not hold them so tightly that we fear risking failure, that we can't learn from our mistakes, that we can't take on criticism or negative feedback as we go. We also want to make sure that we don't end up in this kind of situation as we're being gritty. While most of us would like a little more grit, and certainly this week a bit extra grit would do me well, I also want to make sure that I don't end up in a situation of practicing stupid grit. And we've all had these moments where we've stayed too long in a situation, we've hung on too tightly to a project we should have let go, we've stayed too long in a relationship, be it personal or professional, when we knew that the time had expired on it. So when we cultivate grit, just like any other concept in positive psychology or well-being, we don't want to do it to extremes. We want to make sure that we're using the right amount of grit in the right situations for the right outcome, rather than suffering from stupid grit to our own detriment and the detriment of others around us. And so one of my challenges this week has been looking at, where do I hold on here and be gritty and push through this moment, and where do I need to let go of some of these things and recognise that now might not be the time for them, or this might not be the right approach for them, or this might not be the right client to be trying this with right now, and learning to let some of those things go as well. What we really want to cultivate, I believe, is what the coach Caroline Adams-Miller describes as authentic grit. And authentic grit is the passionate pursuit of hard goals that enable us to emotionally flourish, to be able to take positive risks, to live without regret, and to inspire others as we do. It's easy because people reward us for being gritty to get caught up in what Caroline describes as selfie grit. Look at me, look at this hard thing I did, look at my stickability. But when we suffer from selfie grit, we're often being gritty for the wrong reasons. We're being gritty because we're being extrinsically recognised or rewarded for our grit, rather than being gritty because it's the right thing to do for us and the right thing to do for other people around us. One of the keys to being authentically gritty, Caroline has found, and this is where perhaps I need a little of your help this week and in the weeks to come as well as I navigate myself through the rest of my dream and trying to realise it, is to have the support of other gritty people around us. So that we have other people we trust and can call on who can tell us, you know what, it's time to let that one go. Or you know what, it's time to push through this one. Or you know what, it's time to step up past this plateau. You've plateaued, now what's next? What can you go beyond this and achieve? So my hope for us as a group, that we start to become a tribe of gritty people that inspire and encourage each other on this journey, because being out there in the world and really trying to pull your dream off, whatever that might be, needs help as we do it, so we can cultivate the kind of authentic grit that Caroline talks about. So next time you find yourself perhaps in the middle of a week a little like mine, where things are not only not going to plan, but the things you thought were working suddenly aren't, my encouragement for you is to take a deep breath and think back to what made you passionate about trying to pull this off in the first place. Where's that sense of interest and purpose that makes pushing through this moment meaningful and important enough to persevere? And then what do you need to practice? Where it's not working, what's the deliberate practice you need to do? Or what are the moments of flow that you need to cultivate? For my grit this week, this moment is a fantastic charge for me to go, okay, not everything's working the way I hope, but right now, things are good, and this is why I want to get out there and do the work I'm doing in the world. And when you find yourself sitting on your backside again because you've fallen down, to remember that we all have the ability to stand back up. That learning is part of the process. It's what makes us human, and there's absolutely nothing to be ashamed or embarrassed about as you learn. And then reach for that moment of authentic grit. Thank you so much.